"Push her out," Cornelius Blackwood said, and two men dragged Clara from the wagon into the snow. She was still bleeding from the birth, her twin sons screaming against her chest, the umbilical cords barely cut. The blizzard swallowed her cries as the wagon pulled away, leaving her on her knees in 3 feet of snow, 20 miles from the nearest town, with nothing but the clothes on her back and 2 newborns who would freeze before midnight. Her father-in-law had just sentenced all 3 of them to death. If you want to know how this mother survived the unsurvivable, subscribe to my channel and follow her story to the very end. Comment your city below so I can see how far Clara's journey has traveled. The wagon wheels crunched through the snow, getting farther away, and Clara May Sullivan stopped screaming. Screaming wouldn't bring them back. Screaming wouldn't keep her babies alive. Screaming was just wasted energy, and she had precious little of that left. She looked down at her sons. William, the firstborn, had stopped crying. His tiny face was turning blue at the edges. Benjamin, smaller and weaker, still whimpered against her chest, but his movements were getting sluggish. They were freezing to death, all 3 of them. "No," Clara said out loud. "No, we ain't dying here." She forced herself to stand. Her legs shook. Blood ran down her thighs, hot against the frozen fabric of her dress, melting the snow where it dripped. The afterbirth was still coming. She could feel it, wet and heavy, but she couldn't stop to deal with that now. Shelter. She needed shelter. Through the white curtain of the blizzard, she spotted something. A shape, dark against the snow. Maybe a building, maybe just a rock formation, but it was the only chance she had. Clara walked. Each step was agony. Her body screamed at her to stop, to lie down, to let the cold take away the pain. But her arms were full of her sons, and her sons were still breathing, and as long as they were breathing, she would keep moving. "Your grandfather wanted you dead," she told them, her voice barely a whisper. "But he don't know your mama. He don't know what I'll do to keep you safe." The shape grew closer. It was a cabin, abandoned by the look of it, with a sagging roof and gaps in the walls. But it had 4 walls and something like a door. Clara kicked it open and stumbled inside. The interior was dark and cold, but it was out of the wind. That alone might buy them an hour, maybe 2. She sank to the floor, her back against the wall, and opened her dress to press the babies against her bare skin. Body heat, the only warmth she had left to give. "Stay with me," she begged them. "Please, stay with me." William's eyes fluttered open. He looked at her, really looked at her, and Clara saw her husband in those eyes. Thomas, her Thomas, who had loved her, who had died trying to protect her, whose father had murdered him and was now murdering his sons. "I won't let him win," she promised. "You hear me, William? Benjamin? I won't let that bastard win." 3 hours earlier, she had still believed she might survive this. Cornelius Blackwood had summoned her to his study, and Clara had gone, because refusing Cornelius was not something anyone did. Not his employees, not his business partners, not even his own family. The old man sat behind his massive oak desk, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his white hair gleaming in the lamplight. He looked like a grandfather. He looked like the kind of man who bounced children on his knee and told stories by the fire. He was neither of those things. "You're showing," he said, nodding at her belly. "The doctor says twins." "Yes, sir." Clara kept her voice steady. "Thomas was so happy when he found out." "Thomas is dead." "I know, sir." "Thrown from his horse. Tragic accident." Cornelius sipped his whiskey. "Though I suspect you don't believe that." Clara said nothing. Saying nothing was safest. "I know about the letter," Cornelius continued. "The one my son was writing to Marshal Whitmore. the one detailing my business arrangements with various territorial officials. He set down his glass. I know you have it. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me, girl. I've had men searching your rooms for weeks. They haven't found it, which means you've hidden it well. But I know it exists, and I know you know where it is. Clara's hand moved instinctively to her belly. The letter was there, sewn into the lining of her corset, pressed against her skin. She had carried it every day since Thomas died, waiting for the right moment to deliver it. That moment had never come. Here's what's going to happen, Cornelius said. You're going to give me that letter. Then you're going to sign papers relinquishing any claim to the Blackwood estate. Then you're going to leave Montana and never come back. And if I refuse? Cornelius smiled. It was the most terrifying thing Clara had ever seen. Then I'll have to consider other options. Options that don't involve you leaving Montana alive. You'd murder the mother of your grandchildren? Your son's widow? My son was weak. Cornelius's voice hardened. He inherited that weakness from his mother. I won't allow it to infect another generation. He stood, moving to the window. Twins are a complication. 2 heirs means division. Division means weakness. The Blackwood legacy requires a single, strong inheritor. They're babies. They haven't even been born yet. Precisely. Which makes this the ideal time to solve the problem. Clara felt ice spreading through her veins. You're talking about killing your own grandchildren. I'm talking about protecting everything I've built. Cornelius turned to face her. I started with nothing, girl. Nothing but my 2 hands and my will. I've built an empire. Mines, banks, railroads. Half the territorial government answers to me. I will not let sentiment destroy what I've created. Thomas was right about you. You're a monster. Thomas was a disappointment. Like his mother. Like his brother before him. Cornelius nodded toward the door. Ezra, Marcus, take her. The door opened and 2 men entered. Clara recognized them both. Ezra Colt, with his scarred face and dead eyes. Marcus Webb, bigger and slower, but just as dangerous. Where are you taking me? Clara demanded, even as they grabbed her arms. Somewhere quiet, Cornelius said. Somewhere no one will hear you scream. They had driven for hours. Clara had tried to reason with them, then threaten them, then bribe them. Nothing worked. Ezra drove the wagon like he was hauling cargo, not a pregnant woman. Marcus sat beside him, staring straight ahead, pretending she didn't exist. The contraction started somewhere in the 2nd hour. Please, Clara had gasped. The babies are coming. I need help. Ain't no help where we're going, Ezra replied without turning around. You'll be murderers, both of you, murderers of infants. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Maybe we should... We do what Mr. Blackwood pays us to do. That's the job. You don't like it? You can walk back to Silverbrook and explain to him why you got soft. Marcus fell silent. Clara understood. Cornelius Blackwood didn't forgive failure. He didn't forgive much of anything. The labor came hard and fast, as if her body knew there was no time to waste. Clara delivered William herself, biting through her own lip to keep from screaming. The blood came with him, more than there should have been, soaking through her dress and pooling on the wagon floor. Benjamin came 20 minutes later, smaller and quieter, and by then Clara was barely conscious. She remembered Ezra stopping the wagon. She remembered Marcus saying something about finding a spot. She remembered being dragged out into the snow, her babies clutched against her chest. Then the wagon was gone, and she was alone. Now, in the cabin, Clara tried to focus on what she could control. Fire. She needed fire. She looked around the dim interior. There was a fireplace, cold and empty. Some broken furniture in the corner. A pile of what might have been bedding, now rotted and useless. But there was wood. Old, dry wood from the broken chairs and the collapsed bed frame. Clara laid her sons down on the least dirty spot she could find, wrapping them in her shawl. Then she crawled toward the fireplace, dragging pieces of wood behind her. Her hands were shaking too badly to work properly. She had a flint in her pocket, one she always carried, but striking it required strength she wasn't sure she had left. "Come on," she muttered. "Come on, damn you." Spark. Spark. Nothing. "Please." Spark. A tiny flame caught on the dried moss she'd stuffed under the kindling. Clara cupped her hands around it, sheltering it from the draft, breathing on it gently until it grew strong enough to spread. Fire. She had fire. "You see that, boys?" she called to her sons. "Your mama made fire. Ain't dead yet." She crawled back to them and pulled them close to the growing warmth. William's color was improving. Benjamin was still pale, but his breathing seemed steadier. "We're gonna make it," Clara told them. "We're gonna make it, and we're gonna find that marshal, and we're gonna make sure your grandfather pays for what he's done." The letter was still there, pressed against her skin. The evidence that could destroy Cornelius Blackwood. The last gift her husband had given her. "I love you, Thomas," she whispered. "I'll finish what you started. I swear it." The fire crackled and popped. Outside, the wind howled. And somewhere in the darkness, wolves began to sing. Clara didn't know how long she sat there, feeding the fire with whatever she could find, keeping her sons warm against her chest. Time lost meaning in the cold. There was only the next piece of wood, the next breath, the next heartbeat. She was starting to drift, her eyes closing despite her best efforts, when she heard it. Footsteps. Outside the cabin. Clara's eyes snapped open. She reached for the knife in her boot, the one Ezra and Marcus had missed when they searched her. It wasn't much, just a small blade she used for cutting thread, but it was something. "Who's there?" she called out, hating how weak her voice sounded. No answer, just the creak of the cabin door swinging open. A man stood in the doorway. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in buckskin and fur. His hair was black, hanging past his shoulders, and his face was weathered by wind and sun. High cheekbones, dark eyes that reflected the firelight. Half-breed, Clara thought. That's what people in town called men like him. Half Cherokee, half white, belonging to neither world. She raised her knife. "Stay back." The man didn't move. He just stood there, looking at her, taking in the blood, the babies, the pathetic fire that was already starting to die. "You gonna stab me with that?" he asked. His voice was deep, rough, with an accent she couldn't quite place. "You can barely hold it straight." "I'll do what I have to do to protect my children." "I ain't here to hurt your children." He stepped inside and Clara tensed, but he moved past her to the fireplace, adding wood from a pack on his back. Good wood, dry and seasoned. The fire roared back to life. "I'm here 'cause I saw smoke." Figured someone was either dying or stupid enough to light a fire in an abandoned cabin during a blizzard. Both, probably. The man almost smiled. Almost. "What happened to you?" "My father-in-law happened." Clara lowered the knife, but didn't put it away. "He left me here to die. Me and my sons." "Your father-in-law." The man's eyes moved to the babies. "These are his blood?" "His grandchildren. His sons' sons. He doesn't want them to exist." So he dumps a woman who just gave birth in the middle of nowhere during the worst storm of the winter. The man shook his head. "White men." "Not all white men." "Enough of them." He pulled something from his pack. A water skin, a strip of dried meat. Drink, eat. You're no good to those babies if you're dead. Clara hesitated. Why are you helping me? You want me to stop? I want to know why. The man was quiet for a long moment. He added more wood to the fire, arranged it carefully, then sat back on his heels. My name's Samuel, he said finally. Samuel Ironhorse. My mother was Cherokee, my father was Irish. Around here, they call me half-breed, or worse. He met her eyes. 5 years ago, I had a wife. Her name was Running Deer. She was carrying our child when the soldiers came to move our people off our land. Clara saw something flicker in his dark eyes. Old pain, carefully contained. She tried to talk to them, make them understand. She was good with words, my wife. Gentle. Thought she could reach the good in anyone. Samuel's jaw tightened. They shot her. Not 'cause she was dangerous, just 'cause she was there and they could. She died in my arms. Our baby died with her. I'm sorry, Clara whispered. Sorry don't change nothing. Samuel's voice was flat, but not cold. But you know what does? Choices. Every day we choose what kind of person we're going to be. Those soldiers chose to be killers. Your father-in-law chose to be a monster. He looked at her directly. I choose to be someone who don't let a woman and her babies freeze to death when I can do something about it. Clara felt tears running down her cheeks. She was too tired to wipe them away. I can't pay you, she said. I don't have anything. Didn't ask for nothing. Then what do you want? Samuel was quiet again. Then he reached out and gently touched William's cheek. So softly, the baby didn't even stir. I want him to live, he said. I want something good to come out of all this bad. That enough reason for you? Clara nodded. She couldn't speak anymore. The tears were coming too fast, and her body was shaking with exhaustion and relief, and 1,000 other emotions she couldn't name. You lost a lot of blood, Samuel observed. More than you probably realize. You need rest, and you need proper care. Neither of those things are going to happen here. I can't travel. I can barely move. I know. But staying here ain't an option neither. This cabin won't survive another night of the storm, and even if it does, those men who left you here might come back to make sure you're dead. Clara thought of Ezra's cold eyes, of Marcus's guilty silence. They won't come back. They think the cold will do their work for them. Maybe, but maybe ain't good enough when you got 2 babies depending on you. Samuel stood. There's a settlement, my people. Half a day's ride from here, but I know trails that'll cut that in half. There's a woman there, Grandmother Wren. She's a healer, saved folks from worse than this. Your people won't want me there. I'm white. Some won't, that's true. But Grandmother Wren don't turn away anyone who needs help. It ain't our way. He looked at her steadily. You got a choice to make, Clara. Stay here and probably die, or trust a half-breed you just met and maybe live. What's it gonna be? Clara looked at her sons. William had fallen asleep against her chest, his breathing slow and steady. Benjamin was awake, his dark eyes watching the fire with something like wonder. Thomas had told her once that the measure of a person wasn't in how they acted when things were easy. It was in what they did when everything was falling apart. I'll trust you, she said. I don't have much choice, but even if I did, I think I'd still choose you. Why's that? Because you came. You saw smoke from a dying fire, and you came to help. That tells me more about who you are than anything else could. Samuel nodded slowly. Fair enough. Can you stand? I think so. She couldn't. Her legs gave out the moment she tried to rise, and she would have fallen if Samuel hadn't caught her. His arms were strong and steady, and he held her like she weighed nothing at all. "New plan," he said. "I carry you, you hold the babies. We move slow, we move careful, and we stop the second you say you need to stop. Deal?" "Deal." Samuel wrapped her and the babies in a thick fur blanket from his pack. Then he lifted her in his arms and carried her out into the storm. The cold hit Clara like a fist, driving the breath from her lungs. She buried her face against Samuel's chest, sheltering her sons between their bodies, and prayed. She didn't pray for herself. She prayed for William and Benjamin, for their small hearts to keep beating, for their tiny lungs to keep breathing. She prayed for Samuel, this stranger who had chosen to help her when no one else would. She prayed for Thomas, wherever he was now, hoping he could see that his sacrifice hadn't been in vain. And somewhere deep inside, in a place she didn't even know existed, she prayed for strength. Strength to survive this night. Strength to face whatever came next. Strength to make Cornelius Blackwood pay for everything he'd done. The storm raged around them, but Samuel walked on, steady and sure, carrying her toward a future she couldn't see but was finally starting to believe in. Behind them, the cabin collapsed under the weight of the snow, swallowed by the blizzard as if it had never existed at all. And ahead, somewhere in the darkness, a light was burning. The light grew brighter as Samuel walked, and Clara realized it wasn't a single flame, but many. The warm glow of cook fires and torches flickering through the gaps in hide-covered lodges. She could hear voices now, speaking in a language she didn't understand, and the bark of dogs announcing their arrival. "We're here," Samuel said. "Don't speak unless spoken to. Let me handle this." Clara nodded against his chest. She was too weak to argue, too tired to do anything but hold her babies and trust this man who had carried her through the storm. The settlement was larger than she expected. Dozens of lodges arranged in a rough circle, with a larger structure at the center that seemed to serve as a meeting place. Faces appeared in doorways as they passed, watching with expressions that ranged from curiosity to open hostility. "Samuel Ironhorse brings a white woman into our camp," someone called out. A man, middle-aged, with paint on his face and anger in his voice. "Has he lost his mind?" "She was dying," Samuel replied without breaking stride. "Her and her babies. Let her die somewhere else. We have enough trouble without bringing more." "That ain't your decision to make, Grey Wolf. Take it up with Grandmother Wren if you got a problem." The man called Grey Wolf stepped into their path. He was shorter than Samuel, but broader, with arms like tree trunks and eyes that burned with suspicion. "I'm taking it up with you, right now. Turn around and take her back where you found her." Samuel stopped. Clara felt his arms tighten around her, not from fear, but from something else. Resolve. "Move," Samuel said quietly. "Or what?" "Or I'll move you." The two men stared at each other, the tension stretched like a rope pulled too tight, ready to snap. Clara held her breath, clutching her sons, praying this wouldn't turn violent. "Enough!" The voice came from behind them, old but strong, carrying an authority that made both men turn. Clara craned her neck and saw a woman emerging from the large central lodge. She was ancient, her face a map of wrinkles, her hair white as the snow that still fell around them. But her eyes were sharp and clear, missing nothing. "Grandmother Wren," Samuel said, bowing his head slightly. The old woman approached, ignoring Grey Wolf entirely. She peered at Clara with those sharp eyes, then at the babies, then back at Clara's face. "You're bleeding," she observed. "Badly. And these little ones are half frozen." She turned to Samuel. "Bring her inside. Now." "Grandmother," Grey Wolf protested, "this woman is—" "I know what she is. I also know what she needs. And I know that we don't turn away the dying. not even when they come wrapped in white skin. Grandmother Wren's voice could have cut stone. Or have we become like them, leaving women and children to freeze because they're different? Grey Wolf's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He stepped aside and Samuel carried Clara toward the old woman's lodge. Inside, the warmth hit Clara like a physical force. A fire burned in a central pit, the smoke rising through a hole in the roof. The walls were lined with bundles of dried herbs, animal skins, and objects she didn't recognize. It smelled like sage and wood smoke and something else, something medicinal and sharp. "Put her there," Grandmother Wren ordered, pointing to a pile of furs near the fire. "Then get out." "I should stay," Samuel said. "You should do as you're told. I need to examine her, and I don't need you hovering like a worried hen. Go. Eat something. Sleep. You look like death yourself." Samuel hesitated, then nodded. He lowered Clara gently onto the furs, arranging her so she was propped up slightly, the babies still against her chest. "I'll be right outside," he told her. "Anything happens, you call for me."
"Thank you," Clara whispered, "for everything."
Samuel didn't answer. He just looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his dark eyes, then turned and left. Grandmother Wren wasted no time. She pulled back Clara's blood-soaked dress with hands that were surprisingly gentle, examining the damage with a clinical detachment that reminded Clara of her father. "You tore badly," the old woman said, "and you've been bleeding for hours. Most women would be dead by now." "I'm too stubborn to die." Grandmother Wren laughed, a dry, cackling sound. "Good. Stubborn is useful. Stubborn keeps you alive when nothing else will." She reached for a clay pot near the fire. "This is going to hurt. A lot. But it'll stop the bleeding and fight off infection. You ready?" Clara nodded, bracing herself. The pain was worse than she expected. Whatever Grandmother Wren applied to her wounds burned like liquid fire, and Clara bit down on her own fist to keep from screaming. The babies started crying, disturbed by their mother's distress. "Shh, shh," Grandmother Wren murmured, though Clara wasn't sure if she was talking to her or the infants. "Almost done. Just a little more." After what felt like an eternity, the burning faded to a dull throb. Clara lay gasping, tears streaming down her face, but the bleeding had stopped. She could feel it, the absence of that warm, wet flow that had been slowly killing her. "There." Grandmother Wren sat back, wiping her hands on a cloth. "You'll live, probably, if you rest and don't do anything stupid." She turned her attention to the babies, unwrapping them from their makeshift swaddling with practiced ease. "Now let's see what we've got here." She examined William first, checking his eyes, his fingers, his heartbeat. Then Benjamin, smaller and more fragile. "This one's strong," she said, nodding at William. "A fighter. He'll be trouble when he's older." She looked at Benjamin, frowning slightly. "This one's weaker, but there's a light in him, a wisdom. He'll need more care, but he'll surprise you." "Will they be all right?" "They'll be fine. Cherokee women have been birthing babies in worse conditions than this for generations. It's the mothers who usually give us trouble." Grandmother Wren fixed Clara with a stern look. "You need to eat and sleep, and let me take care of these little ones while you recover." You can't feed them. Not yet. You're too weak, and your body's been through too much. I have a young mother in the village who lost her own child last week. She has milk to spare and a heart that needs healing. She'll nurse your sons until you're strong enough." Clara wanted to argue, but she knew the old woman was right. She could barely lift her arms, let alone feed 2 hungry infants. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "Then don't. Gratitude is for later. Right now, you rest." Clara closed her eyes. She heard Grandmother Wren moving around the lodge, heard her murmuring to the babies in that strange, musical language. And then, finally, she let go, sinking into a sleep so deep it felt like drowning. She woke to sunlight and the smell of cooking meat. For a moment, Clara didn't know where she was. The hide walls, the smoke rising from the fire pit, the unfamiliar sounds outside. None of it made sense. Then memory crashed back, and she sat up too fast, sending pain lancing through her abdomen. "Easy." Grandmother Wren was there, pressing her back down. "You've been asleep for 2 days. Your body needed it."
2 days?
Clara's voice came out as a croak.
My babies
"Are fine. Better than fine. Little Sparrow has been feeding them, and they've taken to her like she was their own mother. Fat and happy, both of them." Relief washed over Clara, so intense it brought tears to her eyes.
Can I see them?
"Soon. First, you eat." Grandmother Wren handed her a bowl of something thick and steaming. Clara took it with shaking hands and brought it to her lips. It was some kind of stew, rich and savory, with chunks of meat and root vegetables she didn't recognize. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until the first swallow hit her stomach. "Slow down," Grandmother Wren warned. "You'll make yourself sick." Clara forced herself to eat more slowly, though every instinct screamed at her to devour the entire bowl. Between bites, she looked around the lodge, taking in details she'd missed before. "Where's Samuel?" "Hunting. He's been gone since yesterday. Said he needed to think." "Think about what?" Grandmother Wren gave her a look that was part amusement, part exasperation. "About you, I imagine. That man's been alone for 5 years, since Running Deer died. Closed himself off from everyone and everything. Then you come along, bleeding and broken, with 2 babies in your arms, and suddenly he's carrying you through a blizzard like some kind of hero from an old story." She shook her head. "You've stirred something up in him. Whether that's good or bad, I can't say." Clara didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. After she finished eating, Grandmother Wren helped her to her feet. The pain was still there, but duller now, manageable. She could walk, slowly and carefully, with the old woman's arm to steady her. They went to another lodge, smaller than Grandmother Wren's, where a young Cherokee woman sat nursing both twins at once. She looked up when Clara entered, and her face, round and pretty, with sad eyes, broke into a gentle smile.
You're awake, she said in accented English. I'm so glad.
I've been talking to your sons, telling them their mama would wake up soon. They didn't believe me, but here you are. Clara felt tears threatening again. This woman, this stranger who had lost her own child, was feeding Clara's babies like they were her own. The kindness of it was almost unbearable. Thank you, Clara managed. I don't know how I can ever... Don't. The young woman's smile turned sad. My little girl died a week ago. Fever took her. I was going crazy with the milk and the grief and nothing to do with either. Your boys? They saved me as much as I saved them. What's your name? Little Sparrow, though I don't feel very little most days. She shifted the babies, making room. You want to hold them? They missed you, I think. Kept looking around like they were searching for something. Clara sat down beside her and took William first, then Benjamin. They were heavier than she remembered, fuller in the face. 2 days of proper feeding had done wonders.
Hello, my loves, she whispered. Mama's here. Mama's not going anywhere.
She sat there for a long time, holding her sons, letting them grip her fingers and stare at her face with those solemn baby eyes. Little Sparrow stayed with her, talking quietly about nothing in particular, filling the silence with warmth. It was almost peaceful, almost safe. Then the shouting started. Clara looked up, her heart instantly racing. Outside she could hear raised voices, the sound of horses, the bark of dogs. Something was wrong. Stay here, Grandmother Wren said, appearing in the doorway. Don't come out until I say. What's happening?
I don't know yet. Just stay." The old woman disappeared. Clara clutched her sons, her mind racing through possibilities. Had Cornelius found her? Had he sent men to finish what Ezra and Marcus had started? Minutes passed like hours. The shouting grew louder, then quieter, then stopped altogether. Clara strained to hear, but she couldn't make out words, only the low murmur of conversation. Finally, Grandmother Wren returned. Her face was grave. "Samuel's back," she said. "He brought news. Bad news." "What kind of news?" "There's a man in town, asking about a white woman with twin babies. Scar on his face. Rides with a bigger man, red-haired. Ezra and Marcus." Clara felt the blood drain from her face. "They know I'm alive." "They suspect. They're offering gold to anyone who can tell them where you are. $20 for information, $50 if someone delivers you to them personally." $50, Clara laughed bitterly. "That's what my life is worth to Cornelius Blackwood. $50. It's enough to tempt some people. Not here, not in our village, but there are others who might talk." Grandmother Wren sat down across from her. "Samuel wants to move you. Take you deeper into the mountains where no one can find you." "No." The word came out stronger than Clara expected. "No more running. No more hiding." "Then what? You can barely walk. You have 2 newborns. What do you think you can do against men with guns and money?" Clara thought of Thomas, of the letter still sewn into her corset, of everything her husband had died trying to accomplish. "I have evidence," she said. "Proof of everything Cornelius has done. Bribes, murders, stolen land. If I can get it to the right person—" "Federal Marshal James Whitmore," Grandmother Wren interrupted. "Yes, Samuel told me. He's in Helena, 5 days' ride from here, in good weather. In winter, with a woman and 2 babies, it could take weeks. If you make it at all." "Then I'll go alone. You keep my sons safe until I come back for them." "And if you don't come back?" Clara hesitated. The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. "Then you raise them," she said finally. "Raise them to be good men. Better men than their grandfather. Better than most men I've known." Grandmother Wren studied her for a long moment. "You're serious?" "I've never been more serious about anything in my life. Cornelius Blackwood destroyed my husband. He tried to destroy me. He tried to kill my children before they were even born. I can't let him keep doing this. I won't." "Even if it means dying?" "If I have to die to stop him, then yes. But I'd rather live. I'd rather see him in chains. I'd rather watch his empire crumble around him and know that I was the one who brought it down." Grandmother Wren was quiet for a long time. Then, slowly, she smiled. "Running Deer was like you," she said. "Fierce. Determined. She never backed down from a fight. Not even when she should have." The old woman reached out and touched Clara's cheek. "Samuel loved her more than life itself. When she died, part of him died too. But these past few days, I've seen something in him, a spark. Something that's been dead for 5 years, starting to come alive again. I don't understand." "You will, when you're ready." Grandmother Wren stood. "Rest now. Tomorrow we'll talk about what comes next. But Clara—" She paused at the doorway. "Don't give up on living just yet. Sometimes the best revenge isn't dying for a cause. It's surviving to see it through." She left, and Clara was alone with her thoughts and her sons. That night, Samuel came to see her. He appeared in the doorway of Little Sparrow's lodge like a shadow, silent and uncertain. Clara looked up from the babies, who were sleeping in a makeshift crib nearby. "Come in," she said. "It's cold out there." Samuel entered, but didn't sit. He stood by the fire, warming his hands, not looking at her. "Grandmother Wren told me your plan," he said finally. "Going to Helena alone, leaving your sons behind. It's the only way. It's suicide. Ezra Colt knows these mountains. He'll track you before you make it a day, and even if you somehow get past him, the winter will kill you. You can't survive out there alone." "Then what do you suggest? Stay here and wait for them to find me? Put your whole village at risk?" "I suggest you let me help." Clara stared at him. "You've already helped, more than I had any right to ask." "Didn't ask. Did it anyway." Samuel finally turned to face her. "I know what you're thinking. Why would a half-breed risk his neck for some white woman he just met? What's in it for him?" "I wasn't thinking that." "Maybe not out loud, but you were wondering." He moved closer, squatting down so they were at eye level. "I'm going to tell you something, Clara. Something I ain't told anyone since Running Deer died." He paused, as if gathering strength. "I was supposed to be there," he said, "the day the soldiers came. I was supposed to be at the village with her. But I went hunting instead. Wanted to bring back something special for the baby, when it came. A deer, maybe. Something to celebrate." Clara saw the pain in his eyes, raw and unhealed. "I heard the gunshots from 2 miles away. By the time I got back, it was over. She was lying in the snow, still warm, and our baby—" His voice broke. "Our baby was still inside her. Never even got to take a breath. Samuel, I blamed myself, still do most days. If I'd been there, maybe I could have stopped it. Maybe I could have saved her. Or maybe I'd be dead too, and that would have been better. At least I wouldn't have to live with the knowing." He reached out and touched her hand. His fingers were rough and calloused, but warm. "When I found you in that cabin, bleeding out, holding those babies like they were the only thing keeping you alive, I saw her. I saw Running Deer, and I thought, maybe this is why I'm still here. Maybe this is what I was saved for. Not to die alongside her, but to make sure it don't happen again. Not to someone else." Clara felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "You don't owe me anything. Ain't about owing. It's about choosing." Samuel's grip tightened on her hand. "I choose to help you. I choose to ride with you to Helena. I choose to see this through, whatever it takes. If you'll have me." Clara looked at this man, this stranger who had become something more in the span of a few days. He had carried her through a storm. He had brought her to his people, risked their anger, defended her against men who would have turned her away. And now he was offering to risk his life again, for reasons that had nothing to do with money or power or obligation. "Why?" she asked. "Truly, why would you do this?" Samuel was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that Clara would remember for the rest of her life. "Because maybe saving you is the same as saving her. Maybe if I can keep you alive, keep your sons alive, then her death wasn't for nothing. Maybe it means something." Clara didn't know what to say, so she did the only thing that felt right. She leaned forward and kissed his cheek, a soft, brief touch that was more gratitude than romance. "Okay," she whispered. "We do this together." Samuel nodded slowly. Together. Outside, the wind howled through the mountain passes, carrying whispers of the storm to come. But inside the lodge, by the warmth of the fire, 2 wounded souls had found something neither expected. Not love, not yet, but something like it. Something that might, if they survived long enough, grow into something more. The next morning, Clara woke to find the village transformed. Word had spread about her situation, about the men hunting her, about the evidence she carried. Some of the Cherokee wanted her gone, That much was clear from the hostile look she received when she ventured outside. But others, more than she expected, had rallied to her cause. "Grey Wolf ain't happy," Samuel told her as they gathered supplies for the journey. "But he's outnumbered."
Grandmother Wren called a council last night. They voted to help you. Why? I'm a stranger, a white woman. They have no reason to risk themselves for me. You're a mother. That counts for something. Samuel handed her a pack filled with dried meat and hardtack. And the evidence you carry? It could hurt men who've hurt us. Cornelius Blackwood owns land that was taken from our people. If he goes down, some of that land might come back. Is that the only reason? Samuel paused. No, there's another reason. A better one. What? You stood up to him. You fought back. You refused to die when dying would have been easier. He met her eyes. Our people respect that. Maybe more than anything else. Clara nodded, absorbing this. She had spent her whole life being taught that native people were savages, animals, less than human. And here they were, showing her more humanity than her own father-in-law ever had. "When do we leave?" she asked. "Tomorrow, early, before Ezra and his men figure out where you are." "And my sons?" "They stay here, with Little Sparrow and Grandmother Wren. They'll be safe." The words hit Clara like a physical blow, even though she had expected them. Leaving her babies behind, even for a few weeks, felt like tearing out a piece of her own heart. But it was the only way. She knew that. Traveling with 2 newborns in winter would slow them down, make them vulnerable. William and Benjamin would be safer here, protected by people who had already shown they were willing to fight for them. "Can I say goodbye?" she asked. "Of course. Take all the time you need." Clara spent the rest of the day with her sons. She held them, fed them, memorized every detail of their small faces. She told them stories about their father, about the kind of man Thomas had been before Cornelius destroyed him. She promised them she would come back. She promised them everything would be all right. She wasn't sure if she believed it, but she said it anyway, because that's what mothers do. That evening, Grandmother Wren came to see her. "I have something for you," the old woman said, pressing a small leather pouch into Clara's hands. "Medicine. For pain, for sickness, for wounds that won't heal. Use it sparingly. It's precious." Clara opened the pouch and saw dried herbs, strange-smelling and unfamiliar. "Thank you. There's something else." Grandmother Wren reached into her robe and pulled out a necklace, a leather cord with a single bear claw hanging from it. "This belonged to Running Deer. She wore it for protection. Samuel gave it to me after she died, told me to keep it safe until someone needed it." Clara shook her head. "I can't take this. It's too important." "It's important because of what it represents. Strength, courage, the will to survive." Grandmother Wren pressed the necklace into her hands. "Running Deer would want you to have it. She was a mother too. She would understand." Clara felt tears threatening again. She seemed to do nothing but cry these days, but maybe that was okay. Maybe tears were just another form of strength. "I'll bring it back," she promised, "when this is over." "I know you will." Grandmother Wren smiled, and for a moment, her ancient face looked almost young. "Now go, rest. Tomorrow you begin the hardest journey of your life." Clara lay awake for hours that night, listening to the wind, thinking about everything that lay ahead. Helena was 5 days' ride in good weather. In winter, with Ezra and his men hunting them, it could take much longer. There would be danger at every turn, death waiting behind every snowdrift. But she wasn't afraid. Not anymore. She had her sons to fight for. She had Samuel to watch her back. She had the letter that could bring Cornelius Blackwood to justice, pressed against her heart like a talisman. And she had something else, something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. It was fragile, uncertain, easily extinguished. But it was there, burning like a small flame in the darkness, and Clara swore she would protect it with everything she had. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin. They left before dawn, when the sky was still black and the stars burned cold above the mountains. Clara kissed her sons one last time, breathing in their scent, feeling the soft warmth of their skin against her lips. William stirred, but didn't wake. Benjamin opened his eyes briefly, looked at her with that solemn gaze that seemed too wise for an infant, then closed them again. "I'll come back," she whispered. "I swear it." Little Sparrow stood in the doorway, holding the blanket. "They'll be safe with us. I'll guard them like they were my own." "They are yours, for now, until I return." Clara forced herself to turn away. Every step felt like walking through water, heavy and slow, her body fighting against the separation. But she kept moving, because stopping meant dying, and dying meant her sons would grow up without a mother, raised by strangers, never knowing the truth about their father or the monster who had tried to kill them. Samuel waited by the horses, two sturdy mountain ponies loaded with supplies. He said nothing as she approached, just handed her the reins and swung up onto his own mount. They rode in silence for the first hour, picking their way through trails that only Samuel could see, hidden paths that wound between rocks and trees and frozen streams. The cold was brutal, cutting through Clara's borrowed furs like they were made of paper, but she didn't complain. Complaining was for people who had options. "You okay?" Samuel asked finally, glancing back at her. "No, but I will be." He nodded, accepting this. "We'll make camp at nightfall. There's a cave I know, about 15 miles from here. Sheltered. Hard to find unless you know where to look." "And Ezra? He knows these mountains too." "Not like I do. These are my people's lands. Every rock, every tree, every animal trail. I've walked them 1,000 times. Ezra Colt might be dangerous, but out here, he's playing on my ground." Clara felt a small measure of comfort at that. Samuel moved through this wilderness like he was part of it, reading signs she couldn't even see, adjusting their course based on changes in the wind or the behavior of birds overhead. He was in his element here, and she had to trust that it would be enough. They stopped briefly at midday to rest the horses and eat. Clara's body ached from riding, her wounds still tender despite Grandmother Wren's medicine. But she forced herself to keep going. Pain was temporary. Death was permanent. "Tell me about Marshal Whitmore," she said, chewing on a strip of dried venison. "How do you know he can be trusted?" "I don't. Not for certain." Samuel was scanning the horizon, his eyes never still. "But Running Deer's brother worked for him once, years ago. Said he was different from other white lawmen. Fair, honest, wouldn't take bribes no matter how much was offered." "That's rare. That's why your husband chose him." Samuel turned to look at her. "Thomas must have done his research. Must have known that Whitmore was the only man in Montana Territory who couldn't be bought by his father." Clara thought about Thomas, about those last weeks before his death. He had been so careful, so secretive, staying up late writing letters he never sent, making trips into town that he wouldn't explain. She had known something was wrong, but she'd trusted him to tell her when he was ready. He never got the chance. "I should have helped him," she said quietly. "I should have known what he was planning. Maybe if I'd been more involved."
You'd be dead too. Samuel's voice was blunt. Cornelius Blackwood don't leave witnesses.
If you'd known, if you'd helped, he would have killed you alongside Thomas. The only reason you're alive is because he didn't think you were a threat. He was wrong. He was, and that's going to be his undoing. They rode on, the terrain growing steeper and more treacherous as they climbed higher into the mountains. The snow was deeper here, the wind more vicious, and Clara found herself leaning low over her horse's neck, trying to present as small a target as possible to the cold. By late afternoon, her hands were numb and her face felt like it was made of ice. But Samuel kept pushing forward, his back straight and his eyes fixed on some point in the distance that only he could see. "Almost there," he called back to her. "Another mile." Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. She was so cold she couldn't feel her lips anymore. The cave appeared suddenly, hidden behind a curtain of frozen brush. Samuel dismounted and pushed aside the branches, revealing a dark opening in the rock face. He went in first, checking for animals or other dangers, then emerged and helped Clara down from her horse. "It's clear. I'll get a fire going." Inside the cave was small but dry, with a sandy floor and walls that blocked the wind. Samuel worked quickly, building a fire from wood he'd brought in his pack, and soon the space was filled with warmth and flickering light. Clara huddled near the flames, feeling returning to her fingers and toes in painful waves. She watched Samuel tend to the horses, his movements efficient and practiced, and thought about how strange it was to trust someone so completely after knowing them for such a short time. "You're staring," Samuel said without turning around. "Sorry, I was thinking." "About what?" "About how different you are from what I expected." Samuel finished with the horses and came to sit across the fire from her. "What did you expect? A savage? A wild man who can't speak proper English?" "Something like that. I'm not proud of it." "Don't be ashamed, neither. You were taught what you were taught. Ain't your fault you believed it." He poked at the fire with a stick. "I was raised to hate white people too. Told they were all devils, every last one. Took me a long time to figure out that hate's a waste of energy. People are people, some good, some bad, most somewhere in between. And me? Where do I fall?" Samuel looked at her for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable in the firelight. "I ain't decided yet," he said finally, "but I'm leaning toward good." Clara smiled, the first real smile she'd managed in days. "That's something, I guess." They ate in comfortable silence, sharing the food from their packs. Clara's body was exhausted, crying out for sleep, but her mind wouldn't quiet. She kept thinking about her sons, about the journey ahead, about all the things that could go wrong. "Get some rest," Samuel said, as if reading her thoughts. "I'll keep watch. Wake me in a few hours. We can take turns." "No need. I don't sleep much anyway." Clara wanted to argue, but she was too tired. She lay down on the sandy floor, pulling her furs around her, and closed her eyes. Sleep came faster than she expected, dragging her down into darkness. She dreamed of Thomas. He was standing in a field of wildflowers, the sun warm on his face, smiling at her the way he used to when they were first married. He looked happy, at peace. "You're doing the right thing," he said. "I'm proud of you." "I'm scared," Clara admitted. "What if I fail?" "You won't. You're stronger than you know." He reached out and touched her face, and his hand was warm, solid, real. "Take care of our boys, Clara. Tell them about me. Tell them their father loved them, even though he never got to hold them." "I will. I promise." "And Clara?" His smile turned sad. "Don't spend the rest of your life grieving. I want you to be happy. I want you to live." She woke with tears on her cheeks and the fire burned down to embers. Samuel was standing at the cave entrance, silhouetted against the gray light of dawn. His posture was tense, alert. "What is it?" Clara asked, sitting up. "Riders, about a mile out, coming this way." Fear shot through her like ice water. "Ezra?" "Can't tell from here, but there's 3 of them, moving fast." Samuel turned to face her. "We need to go. Now." They packed in seconds, throwing supplies onto the horses with desperate efficiency. Clara's hands were shaking, but she forced them to work, forced herself to focus on the task at hand. They rode out the back of the cave, through a narrow passage that Clara hadn't even noticed the night before. It opened onto a steep slope, treacherous with loose rock and snow, but Samuel guided his horse down without hesitation, and Clara followed. Behind them, she heard voices shouting. "They found the cave," Samuel said grimly. "They'll find our trail, too. We need to move faster. The horses can't handle faster, not on this terrain." "Then we make them handle it." They pushed on, the horses sliding and stumbling, Clara's heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. The voices behind them grew louder, closer. She risked a glance back and saw 3 riders cresting the ridge above the cave, their figures dark against the pale sky. One of them pointed directly at her. "There!" a voice shouted, Ezra's voice. "I see them!" "Go!" Samuel slapped her horse's flank, sending it lunging forward. "Don't stop for anything!" The chase began in earnest. Clara had never ridden this fast in her life. The world blurred around her, snow and rock and trees whipping past in a dizzying rush. She clung to the horse's mane, trusting the animal to find its footing, praying she wouldn't be thrown. Gunshots cracked behind them. One bullet whined past her ear, so close she felt the wind of its passage. "Down!" Samuel shouted. "Keep your head down!" More shots. The tree beside her exploded in a shower of splinters. Clara screamed but kept driving, kept moving, because stopping meant dying, and she was not ready to die. They burst out of the trees onto a frozen river, the ice thick enough to hold the horse's weight. Samuel veered left, following the river's course, and Clara stayed on his heels. "There's a ford up ahead," he called back. "We cross there, lose them in the rapids." "Rapids? The river's frozen." "Not all of it. Trust me." Clara didn't have a choice. She trusted. The ford appeared around a bend, a narrow point where the river widened and the ice gave way to churning black water. Samuel's horse plunged in without hesitation, the current immediately grabbing at its legs. Clara followed, gasping as the freezing water hit her boots, her legs, her waist. The cold was like nothing she'd ever experienced. It seized her chest, drove the air from her lungs, made every muscle in her body want to lock up and stop working. But she kept moving. She had to keep moving. They emerged on the far bank, soaked and shaking, just as Ezra and his men reached the ford. One of them started to follow, but Ezra held up his hand. "It's too dangerous!" Ezra shouted across the water. "We'll go around!" Samuel didn't wait to hear more. He kicked his horse into motion, and they disappeared into the trees on the far side. They rode for another hour before Samuel finally slowed. Clara was shivering so violently she could barely stay in the saddle, her wet clothes freezing solid against her skin. "We need to stop," Samuel said. "You'll die of cold if we don't get you warm." "Ezra, we'll take hours to find a safe crossing. We have time." He scanned the landscape, then pointed. "There, another cave. Smaller, but it'll do." The cave was barely more than a crack in the rock, but it was sheltered from the wind and dry inside. Samuel helped Clara dismount, his hands warm against her frozen skin. "Strip," he said bluntly. "Your clothes, all of them. They're killing you." Clara hesitated, but only for a moment. Modesty was a luxury for people who weren't freezing to death. She peeled off her wet things with numb fingers while Samuel started a fire. He kept his back turned, giving her what privacy he could, but there wasn't much room for secrets in a space this small. Here, he handed her his own coat, dry and warm. Put this on. I'll hang your clothes by the fire. Clara wrapped the coat around her naked body, grateful for its warmth, grateful for his decency. She was shivering too hard to speak, her teeth chattering so violently they hurt. Samuel moved around the small space, efficient and focused. He hung her clothes near the fire, wrapped her in additional furs, pressed a warm drink into her hands. "Drink," he ordered. "All of it." It was some kind of tea, bitter and medicinal. Clara drank it down, feeling warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you," she managed. "Don't thank me yet. We ain't out of this." "We're alive. That's something." Samuel sat down across from her, close enough that she could see the concern in his eyes. "You scared me back there. When we hit that water, I thought, I'm tougher than I look." "Yeah." A hint of a smile crossed his weathered face. "I'm starting to figure that out." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the fire crackle and the wind howl outside. Clara's shivering gradually subsided as the warmth seeped into her bones. "How much farther to Helena?" she asked. 3 days, maybe 4, depending on the weather. "And Ezra?" "He'll keep coming. Men like him don't give up easy." Samuel's jaw tightened. "But neither do I." Clara studied his face in the firelight. The strong jaw, the high cheekbones, the eyes that held so much pain and so much strength. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "You can ask." "That night in the cabin, when you found me, what would you have done if I'd died? If you'd gotten there too late?" Samuel was quiet for a long moment. "I would have buried you," he said finally. "You and your babies. Proper. With prayers. Then I would have gone after the men who did it." "And killed them?" "Yes." There was no hesitation in his voice, no doubt. "And Cornelius?" Clara pressed. "Would you have gone after him, too?" Samuel met her eyes. "I would have burned his world to the ground, everything he built, everyone he loved. I would have made him understand what it feels like to lose everything." Clara shivered, but not from cold this time. "That's a lot of hate." "It ain't hate. It's justice." Samuel leaned forward. "Your father-in-law thinks he's untouchable, thinks his money and his power put him above consequences. But nobody's above consequences. Not forever. Sooner or later, the bill comes due. And we're going to make sure he pays it." "Damn right we are." The conviction in his voice steadied something inside Clara. She wasn't alone in this. She had an ally, a partner, someone who understood what was at stake and was willing to fight for it. "Samuel," she said quietly, "I need to tell you something." "What?" "When this is over, if we survive, I'm going to ask you to stay." He blinked, clearly not expecting this. "Stay where?" "With me. With my sons. I know we barely know each other. I know it's crazy. But you saved my life, and more than that, you gave me hope. You made me believe I could actually do this." She swallowed hard. "I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose you." Samuel stared at her for what felt like an eternity. Then he reached out and took her hand, his fingers rough and warm against her skin. "Ask me again when we're done," he said. "When Cornelius is in chains and your boys are safe in your arms. Ask me then, and I'll give you my answer." "Is that a yes?" "It's a maybe, and that's more than I've given anyone in 5 years." Clara smiled, feeling tears prick her eyes.
I'll take it.
They slept close together that night, sharing warmth, sharing breath. Nothing happened between them. Clara was too exhausted and too wounded for that. But there was an intimacy in the closeness, a connection that went beyond words. When she woke the next morning, Samuel was already up, packing their supplies. "Your clothes are dry," he said, nodding toward the fire. "We should move. Ezra will have found a crossing by now." Clara dressed quickly, her body stiff and sore but functional. She felt stronger than she had the day before, the rest and warmth having done their work. They rode out into a world transformed by fresh snowfall. Everything was white and silent, the trees heavy with powder, the air so cold it burned. "Storm covered our tracks," Samuel observed. "That's good. Buys us some time." They pushed on, moving faster now, the horses rested and eager. The terrain began to flatten as they descended from the high mountains, the trees thinning out into rolling hills dotted with frozen streams. By midday, they could see smoke on the horizon. A town. "Millbrook," Samuel said. "Small place, mostly miners and trappers. We can get supplies there, maybe hear news." "Is it safe?" "Safer than staying in the open, and you need real food, real rest." They approached the town cautiously, keeping to the back roads, avoiding the main street. Samuel found a small boarding house on the outskirts and paid for a room in cash, using a name that wasn't his. "Stay here," he told Clara. "I'll get supplies and see what I can learn. Don't open the door for anyone but me." "Be careful." "Always am." He was gone for 2 hours. Clara spent the time pacing the small room, unable to sit still, her nerves wound tight as a spring. Every noise from outside made her jump. Every footstep in the hall sent her reaching for the knife Samuel had given her. When he finally returned, his face was grim. "Bad news," he said, closing the door behind him. "Ezra's put out a bounty. $200 for information about a white woman with red-brown hair traveling with a half-breed. Every man in this town knows about it." Clara felt her blood run cold. "Did anyone recognize you?" "Maybe. There was a man at the general store who looked at me too long, asked too many questions." Samuel started gathering their things. "We need to leave. Now." They slipped out the back of the boarding house, just as shouting erupted from the front. Clara caught a glimpse of men with guns, heard someone yelling about the bounty. And then she was running, Samuel's hand tight around hers, pulling her through the snow. The horses were where they'd left them, hidden behind a barn. They mounted in seconds and rode out of town at a gallop, bullets cracking in the air behind them. "Don't look back," Samuel shouted. "Just ride." Clara rode. She rode until her legs ached and her lungs burned, and the town was nothing but a smear on the horizon behind them. They didn't stop until nightfall. "Helena's still 2 days away," Samuel said, breathing hard. "And now every town between here and there will be looking for us." "Then we don't go through the towns." "That means mountain trails, harder, slower, more dangerous." Clara thought about her sons, waiting for her back at the Cherokee village. Thought about Thomas, and the letter pressed against her heart. Thought about Cornelius Blackwood, sitting in his mansion, confident that his money and his power would protect him from consequences. "I don't care how dangerous it is," she said. "We keep going. We don't stop until we reach that marshal." Samuel looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "All right. We keep going." He reached out and touched her cheek, a brief gesture of affection that made her heart skip. "But Clara, when we get there, you're going to let me do the talking. Whitmore's a good man, but he don't know you. He knows me. Or at least, he knows my reputation." "What reputation?" Samuel's mouth curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. "The one that says I don't lie. Not ever. Not for anyone." Clara nodded, understanding.
In a world full of liars and cheats and men who would say anything for $1, a reputation for honesty was worth more than gold. Then let's go make sure that reputation counts for something.
They rode into the darkness, two figures against the vast Montana sky, moving toward a reckoning that had been building since the moment Cornelius Blackwood decided that his grandchildren were a problem to be eliminated. Behind them, the hunt continued. Ahead, justice waited. And Clara May Sullivan, who had been left to die in a blizzard with her newborn sons, was done running. It was time to fight. Helena appeared on the third morning, rising from the valley like a promise. Clara had never seen anything so beautiful. After days of endless white, endless cold, endless fear, the sight of buildings and smoke and civilization made her want to weep with relief. "Don't relax yet," Samuel warned, reading her expression. "Town's full of people. Any one of them could be working for Blackwood." "I know, but we made it. We're actually here." Getting here was the easy part. Now comes the hard part. They approached the town from the north, sticking to back roads and alleys, avoiding the main thoroughfare where people gathered and gossip spread. Samuel led them to a small stable on the outskirts, run by an old man with one eye and no questions. "Federal courthouse is on Main Street," Samuel said as they dismounted. "Marshal's office is inside. But we can't just walk in the front door. Too many eyes." "Then how do we get to him?" Samuel was quiet for a moment, thinking. "There's a man I know, preacher named Josiah Gray. He's got connections in the courthouse, does charity work with the prisoners. If anyone can get us to Whitmore without being seen, it's him." "You trust this preacher?" "I trust him more than anyone else in this town." They found Reverend Gray at his church, a small wooden building with a crooked steeple and peeling paint. He was a thin man, maybe 60, with kind eyes and hands that trembled slightly as he poured them coffee. "Samuel Ironhorse," the preacher said, shaking his head. "I heard you were dead." "Heard wrong." "Apparently so." Gray's eyes moved to Clara, taking in her worn clothes, her exhausted face. "And who is this?" "Clara Sullivan, widow of Thomas Blackwood." The preacher's eyebrows rose. "Blackwood? As in Cornelius Blackwood?" "His son. His dead son." Clara stepped forward. "Reverend, I need to see Marshal Whitmore. I have evidence that can put Cornelius Blackwood in prison for the rest of his life. But there are men hunting me, and if they find me before I can deliver it, you'll be dead and the evidence will disappear." Gray nodded slowly. "I've heard things about Cornelius Blackwood. Dark things. Whispers that never quite turn into accusations." He looked at Samuel. "You believe her?" "I do." "Then that's good enough for me." The preacher stood. "Wait here. I'll send word to Whitmore. He'll come." "He'll come here? To your church?" "He owes me a few favors. Besides, Harrison Whitmore is one of the few honest men left in Montana Territory. If there's a chance to bring down someone like Blackwood, he'll take it." Gray left, and Clara and Samuel waited in the small church office, surrounded by books and papers and the faint smell of candle wax. Clara paced, too anxious to sit, her hand pressed against her chest where the letter rested. "What if he doesn't believe us?" she asked. "He'll believe the evidence." "What if it's not enough? What if Cornelius has bought him too?" Samuel caught her arm, stopping her mid-pace. "Clara, look at me." She looked. "We've come too far to give up now. We've survived things that should have killed us. We're going to walk into that marshal's office. We're going to hand over that letter. And we're going to watch Cornelius Blackwood's world burn." His grip tightened. "You hear me? We're going to win this." Clara took a deep breath, steadying herself. Okay. You're right." "Damn right I'm right." They waited another hour. Clara was starting to think something had gone wrong when the door opened and two men entered. The first was Reverend Gray. The second was a tall man in his 50s, with iron gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. He wore a federal marshal's badge on his chest and moved with the easy confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime enforcing the law. "Marshal Harrison Whitmore," Gray said. "This is Samuel Ironhorse and Clara Sullivan." Whitmore studied them both, his expression unreadable. "Josiah says you have evidence against Cornelius Blackwood." "I do." Clara reached into her dress and pulled out the letter, its paper worn and creased from weeks of being pressed against her skin. "This is a letter my husband was writing before he died. It details every bribe Cornelius has paid, every official he's corrupted, every man who's died in his mines because he refused to spend money on safety." Whitmore took the letter carefully, as if it might bite him. He unfolded it and began to read, his face growing harder with each line. "Governor Patterson, Judge Morrison, Colonel Bennett." He looked up. "Half the territorial government is in this letter. They're all on Cornelius's payroll, have been for years. And your husband knew this how? Thomas was being groomed to take over the business. Cornelius showed him everything, trusted him with all his secrets. But Thomas couldn't stomach it. He was going to expose his own father. And then he died. Thrown from his horse, that's what they said. But I know better. Cornelius had him killed." Whitmore was quiet for a long moment, still holding the letter. Clara could see him working through the implications, calculating the risks and the rewards. "This is enough to open an investigation," he said finally. "Maybe enough to make arrests. But Blackwood has powerful friends. Friends who will fight to protect him." "I know." "And you're willing to testify? In court? Under oath?" Clara thought about her sons, waiting for her back at the Cherokee village. Thought about Thomas, buried in the cold Montana earth. Thought about everything she had survived to get to this moment. "I'll testify," she said. "I'll tell them everything." Whitmore nodded slowly. "Then we have work to do." The next few hours were a blur of activity. Whitmore sent deputies to secure the church, posting guards at every entrance. He brought in a court stenographer to take Clara's official statement, a detailed account of everything she had witnessed and everything Thomas had told her. Clara talked until her throat was raw, answering question after question, reliving the worst moments of her life for the record. Samuel stayed with her the whole time, a silent presence at her side, his hand occasionally touching her shoulder when she faltered. By late afternoon, they had enough for an arrest warrant. Whitmore sent word to the territorial governor, requesting federal troops to accompany him to Silverbrook County. "It'll take a few days to organize," the marshal said. "In the meantime, you'll stay here, under guard. Blackwood has a long reach. I don't want you disappearing before we can move." "I'm not going anywhere," Clara said. But Cornelius Blackwood had other plans. The attack came at midnight. Clara was sleeping in a small room at the back of the church, Samuel keeping watch in a chair by the door. The first gunshot jerked her awake, followed by shouting and the crash of breaking glass. "They found us," Samuel said, already on his feet, rifle in hand. "Stay down." More shots, screaming, the sound of men fighting. Clara grabbed the knife Samuel had given her and pressed herself against the wall. Through the thin door, she could hear boots pounding on wooden floors, voices barking orders. "Check every room! Find the woman!" Ezra. She would know that voice anywhere. The door burst open and a man rushed in. Clara didn't think. She just moved, driving the knife into his shoulder before he could raise his gun. He screamed and fell, and Samuel was there, slamming the butt of his rifle into the man's skull. "Come on," Samuel grabbed her hand. "Back window, now!" They climbed through the window into the alley behind the church. The night was chaos,
gunfire and shouting, and the orange glow of fire. Someone had set the church ablaze. "Reverend Gray!" Clara gasped. "We have to help him." "He's already gone. I saw him slip out the front when the shooting started." Samuel pulled her along, moving fast through the shadows. "We need to get to Whitmore. He's our only chance now." They ran through the dark streets of Helena, staying low, staying quiet. Behind them, the church burned like a beacon, drawing attention away from their escape. The federal courthouse loomed ahead, a solid stone building with armed guards at every entrance.
Samuel headed straight for the front door. "Stop right there!" One of the guards raised his rifle. "Identify yourselves." "Samuel Ironhorse. I'm with Marshal Whitmore. We're under attack." The guard hesitated, clearly unsure. "There are men burning the church on 4th Street, Samuel said urgently. "They're trying to kill a federal witness. You want to explain to the marshal why you let her die on your doorstep?" That did it. The guard stepped aside, and they rushed inside. Whitmore met them in the main hall, fully dressed despite the late hour, his face grim. "I know," he said before they could speak. "I saw the fire. My deputies are on their way." "Ezra Colt is leading them," Clara said. "He works for Cornelius. He's been hunting me since I escaped." "Colt." Whitmore's jaw tightened. "I know that name. He's wanted in 3 territories for murder. He's going to kill everyone who gets in his way. He doesn't care about laws or consequences." "Then we'll have to stop him before he gets the chance." More deputies arrived, reporting that the attackers had scattered when they saw reinforcements coming. The church was badly damaged, but still standing. Reverend Gray had been found hiding in a neighbor's cellar, shaken but unharmed. "They'll regroup," Samuel said. "Come back with more men." "Let them come." Whitmore's voice was hard. "This is a federal courthouse. Attacking it is an act of war against the United States government. If Blackwood wants to make this a fight, I'll give him one he won't forget." Clara felt something shift inside her. For weeks she had been running, hiding, surviving. Now, for the first time, she was standing with people who had the power to fight back. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we wait for morning. Then we ride to Silverbrook and arrest Cornelius Blackwood for conspiracy, bribery, and attempted murder." Whitmore looked at her directly. "You're sure about this? Once we move, there's no going back. Blackwood will throw everything he has at us." "I'm sure." "Then get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." But Clara couldn't sleep. She sat by the window of the small office Whitmore had given her, watching the stars fade as dawn approached. Samuel found her there, silent and still. "You should be resting," he said. "Can't. Too much in my head." He sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "What are you thinking about?" "My sons. Whether I'll ever see them again." "You will." "You don't know that." "No, but I believe it." He turned to face her. "Clara, I've seen a lot of death in my life. I've seen good people die for no reason, and bad people live forever. But I've also seen something else. I've seen people who should have died, who had every right to give up, keep fighting anyway. And sometimes, those people win." "You think we're going to win?" "I think we've already won, more than we had any right to expect. Everything else is just finishing the job." Clara leaned against him, drawing comfort from his warmth. "Samuel, if something happens to me today..." "Nothing's going to happen to you." "But if it does, I need you to promise me something." He was quiet, waiting. "Find my sons. Take them somewhere safe. Raise them to be good men." Her voice broke. "Tell them their mother loved them more than anything in the world." Samuel took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers.
I promise. But Clara, I don't intend to let anything happen to you. I've lost too much already. I'm not losing you, too." She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something in his eyes that she hadn't expected. Something that went beyond gratitude or obligation. "Samuel." "Don't say anything. Not yet." He touched her face, gentle as a whisper.
"When this is over, when Blackwood is in chains and your boys are in your arms, then we'll talk about what comes next. But right now, we focus on surviving the day." Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. They sat together in silence, watching the sun rise over Helena, knowing that everything was about to change. The ride to Silverbrook took 2 days. Whitmore had assembled a force of 20 federal deputies, supplemented by a squad of Army soldiers borrowed from the territorial garrison. It was an impressive show of force, and Clara couldn't help but feel a grim satisfaction at the sight. Cornelius Blackwood had ruled this territory like a king for 20 years. Now the king was about to face justice. They arrived at the Blackwood mansion as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. The house stood dark and silent. No lights in the windows, no smoke from the chimneys. "Something's wrong," Samuel said, his hand moving to his rifle. Whitmore dismounted, signaling for his men to fan out. "Blackwood, this is Federal Marshal Harrison Whitmore. You're under arrest. Come out with your hands raised." No response. The wind moaned through the empty yard. "Break down the door," Whitmore ordered. Deputies rushed forward, axes swinging. The door splintered and collapsed. They poured inside, weapons ready. Clara followed, Samuel at her side. The interior of the mansion was dark and cold, furniture covered with sheets, fireplaces empty. It looked like no one had been there in days. "He's gone," she breathed. "He knew we were coming." "Search every room," Whitmore shouted. "Check the cellars, the attic, everything." They searched for an hour. The mansion was empty. Cornelius Blackwood had vanished, along with anything that might have been used as evidence. "Someone warned him," Samuel said grimly. "Someone in Helena." "One of my own people." Whitmore's face was thunder. "When I find out who—" "Marshal!" A deputy came running from the back of the house. "There's someone in the stable! A woman!" They found her huddled in an empty stall, wrapped in a thin blanket, shivering with cold. Clara recognized her immediately. "Mrs. Blackwood," she said softly. "Margaret." Cornelius's wife looked up, and Clara saw the bruises on her face, the split lip, the terror in her eyes. "Clara?" Margaret whispered. "Is that you? I thought you were dead. I survived, no thanks to your husband." "He's not my husband anymore," Margaret's voice cracked. "He found out I knew. About Thomas. About you. He was going to kill me too, but Ezra talked him out of it. Said I might be useful as a hostage." "Where is he? Where did Cornelius go?" Margaret hesitated, fear warring with something else in her eyes. "I don't know exactly, but I heard them talking about the mountain house, an old hunting lodge up in the hills. He keeps supplies there. I can show you." Margaret struggled to her feet, and Clara saw how thin she had become, how fragile. "But Clara, there's something else, something you need to know." "What?" "Ezra. He's not with Cornelius. He left 2 days ago with a group of men." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "He's going after your babies. Cornelius ordered him to destroy everything you care about." The words hit Clara like a physical blow. For a moment, she couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stand there as the horror of it washed over her. Her sons, William and Benjamin, alone in the Cherokee village, while Ezra Colt and his killers rode toward them. "No," she whispered. No, no, no. We have to go, Samuel grabbed her arm. Now, right now. Wait, Whitmore stepped forward. We can't just abandon the pursuit. Blackwood can wait, Samuel said.
If you think I'm going to let them die while we chase some old man through the mountains, you're out of your mind. The marshal hesitated, torn between duty and humanity. Clara stepped forward. Marshal, you have Margaret. She can guide your men to the hunting lodge. But I have to get to my sons. If Ezra hurts them, if he... She couldn't finish the sentence. Whitmore looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Go. Take half my deputies. I'll handle Blackwood with the rest. Thank you. Clara turned and ran for her horse, Samuel right behind her. Within minutes, they were riding hard into the gathering darkness, 12 armed men at their backs, racing against time. How far to the village? Clara shouted over the pounding of hooves. 2 days. Maybe less if we don't stop. Then we don't stop. They rode through the night, pushing the horses to their limits, eating in the saddle, sleeping in shifts. Clara's body screamed for rest, but she refused to slow down. Every minute that passed was a minute closer to disaster. On the morning of the second day, they crested a ridge and saw smoke. Clara's heart stopped. The Cherokee village was burning. No. The word came out as a moan. No, please, God, no. She kicked her horse into a gallop, ignoring Samuel's shout of warning, ignoring the danger, ignoring everything except the desperate need to reach her children. The village was chaos. Lodges collapsed and smoldering. People running, screaming. Bodies on the ground, some moving, some still. Clara leaped from her horse before it had fully stopped, her eyes scanning the destruction, searching, praying. William! Benjamin! Little Sparrow! Clara! A voice she recognized. Grandmother Wren, emerging from the smoke, her face blackened, her clothes torn. Clara, over here! Clara ran to her. My sons! Where are my sons? Safe. Little Sparrow took them into the caves when the attack started. The old woman grabbed her arm. But Clara, the men who did this, they're still here. They're searching for the cave entrance. Where? Grandmother Wren pointed toward the northern ridge, where a cluster of armed men were forcing a group of Cherokee prisoners toward a rocky outcropping. Clara saw him immediately. Ezra Colt, his scarred face twisted with impatience, shouting orders at his men. Tell me where they are. Ezra grabbed one of the prisoners, a young man Clara recognized as Grey Wolf. Tell me where the babies are hidden, or I'll kill every last one of you. Grey Wolf spat in his face. I'll tell you nothing, white devil. Ezra raised his pistol. Ezra looked up, and when he saw her, his face contorted with rage. You! I should have cut your throat. You're alone, Colt. No backup coming. No one to save you. Something flickered in Ezra's expression. Not fear, exactly, but the beginning of doubt. So what happens now? He asked. You gonna shoot me? Murder me in cold blood? Clara thought about it. God help her, she actually thought about it. This man had tried to kill her, had tried to kill her children, had burned an entire village to the ground looking for 2 innocent babies. He deserved to die. But she wasn't a murderer. She wasn't Cornelius Blackwood. No, she said finally. I'm not going to kill you. I'm going to let the law do that. She nodded to the deputies. Take him. Take all of them. The deputies moved in, disarming Ezra's men and binding their hands. Ezra himself submitted quietly, the fight gone out of him. As they led him away, he looked back at Clara one last time. You know something? He said. Your husband was right about you. You're stronger than any of us ever knew.
Clara didn't respond. She was already running toward the caves, toward her sons, toward the only thing that mattered anymore. She found them in little Sparrow's arms, safe and healthy and crying for their mother. Clara gathered them close, breathing in their scent, feeling their small hearts beating against her chest. "I'm here," she whispered through her tears. "Mama's here. I'm never leaving you again." Samuel found her there, surrounded by crying children and grateful survivors, holding her sons like she would never let go. "We got them all," he said quietly. "Ezra's men, every last one. It's over, Clara. It's really over." Clara looked up at him, this man who had saved her life so many times, who had followed her into hell and back. "Not over," she said. "Just beginning." And for the first time in months, she smiled. The news from Helena arrived 3 days later. Clara was sitting outside Grandmother Wren's rebuilt lodge, nursing William, while Benjamin slept in a cradle beside her, when Samuel came riding into the village. His face told her everything she needed to know before he even dismounted. "They got him," he said. "Cornelius Blackwood is in federal custody." Clara closed her eyes, letting the words wash over her. For weeks, she had dreamed of this moment, imagined how it would feel. She had expected joy, triumph, maybe even vindication. Instead, she felt empty, tired, like a soldier who had fought too long and couldn't remember what peace felt like. "How?" she asked. Margaret led them to the hunting lodge. He was there with 4 men, all that was left of his empire. Samuel sat down beside her. He didn't even fight, just came out with his hands up, like he'd been waiting for it. "And the trial?" "Scheduled for next month. Whitmore's building the case now. With your testimony and the letter and everything else, the prosecutor says conviction is guaranteed. 25 years to life." Clara looked down at William, his small mouth working at her breast, his eyes closed in contentment. This child would never know his grandfather, would never understand the evil that had tried to destroy him before he was even born. That was a blessing. "It's over then," she said quietly. "It's really over." "The hard part is..." Samuel's hand found hers. "Now comes the harder part." "What's harder than surviving?" "Living. Figuring out what comes next." He squeezed her fingers. "Building something worth surviving for." Clara thought about that for a long moment. She thought about Thomas, buried in the cold Montana earth. About Ruth, whom she had never met, who had given up everything trying to do the right thing. About all the people who had died so that she and her sons could sit here in the sunshine, alive and free. "I want to stay here," she said suddenly, "with the Cherokee, with your people." Samuel looked at her, surprise flickering in his dark eyes. "You sure about that? Life here ain't easy. The government's still pushing for relocation. There's no guarantee we can keep this land." "Then we fight to keep it. We fight for as long as it takes." Clara met his gaze. "I'm tired of running, Samuel. I'm tired of being afraid. I want a home, a real home, with people who care about me, where my sons can grow up knowing who they are and where they came from." "And me? Where do I fit in this picture?" Clara took a deep breath. This was the question she had been avoiding, the conversation she had been too scared to have. But she was done being scared. "I want you to stay with me," she said. "Not as a protector or a guide or a friend, as something more." Samuel was quiet for so long that Clara started to worry she had made a terrible mistake. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his weathered face. "That's good," he said, "because I wasn't planning on going anywhere." "Is that a yes?" "It's a yes." He leaned forward and kissed her, soft and sweet, tasting of coffee and hope
and something that might have been love. It's been a yes since the moment I found you in that cabin. Clara laughed, the first real laugh she had managed in months. It felt strange in her throat, rusty from disuse, but good, so good. Then I guess we've got some planning to do. I guess we do. The trial of Cornelius Blackwood began on a gray morning in March, with snow still clinging to the mountains and ice rimming the windows of the Helena courthouse. Clara sat in the witness box, her hands folded in her lap, her voice steady as she recounted everything. The abandonment on the mountain, the birth of her sons in that freezing cabin, the weeks of running, hiding, fighting to survive. The jury listened in silence.
Some of them looked horrified. Others looked angry. A few had tears in their eyes. Cornelius sat at the defendant's table, flanked by expensive lawyers from San Francisco. He looked older than Clara remembered, smaller somehow, like the power had been drained out of him. He never met her eyes, not once. "Mrs. Sullivan," the prosecutor said, using her maiden name at her request, "is the man who ordered your death present in this courtroom?" "Yes." "Can you identify him?" Clara turned and looked directly at Cornelius Blackwood. For a moment, she saw the man who had terrorized her, who had murdered his own son, who had tried to kill her children. Then she saw something else. A broken old man, alone and afraid, facing the consequences of a lifetime of cruelty. "That's him," she said. "Cornelius Blackwood, my husband's father. The man who tried to murder me and my newborn sons." The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel, calling for order. Cornelius's lawyers objected to something, but Clara didn't hear what. She was too busy watching her father-in-law's face, watching the last vestiges of his arrogance crumble into ash. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Witness after witness came forward to testify about Blackwood's crimes. Minors who had watched friends die in unsafe conditions. Politicians who confessed to taking bribes. Business partners who had been threatened, blackmailed, ruined. And finally, Margaret Blackwood, Cornelius's own wife, who described in devastating detail how her husband had ordered the murder of his son and the abandonment of his pregnant daughter-in-law. "He said the Blackwood line couldn't be divided," Margaret testified, her voice trembling but clear. "He said twins would split the inheritance, create weakness. He said they had to die, all 3 of them." The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Conspiracy to commit murder. Attempted murder. Bribery of public officials. Obstruction of justice. A lifetime of crimes finally brought into the light. The judge sentenced him to 30 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole. Clara watched them lead Cornelius away in chains. He shuffled past her without a word, without a glance. A broken man going to a cage where he would spend the rest of his days. She felt nothing. No joy, no satisfaction. Just a quiet sense of closure, like the final page of a book she had been reading for too long. "It's done," Samuel said, appearing at her side. "You did it." "We did it." Clara took his hand. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." "You could have. You would have found a way." He squeezed her fingers. "You're the strongest person I've ever known, Clara Sullivan. Don't let anyone tell you different." Clara leaned against him, drawing strength from his warmth. "Take me home." "Where's home?" "Wherever you are. Wherever our family is." Samuel smiled and pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Then let's go." Spring came to the mountains like a gift. The snow melted, revealing wild flowers and fresh grass, and streams running clear and cold from the high peaks. The Cherokee village came alive with activity.
as families emerged from their winter lodges, eager to plant crops and tend animals and feel the sun on their faces. Clara stood outside the cabin she and Samuel had built together, watching her sons play in the dirt. They were 6 months old now, growing stronger every day, their personalities emerging like butterflies from cocoons. William was bold and adventurous, always reaching for things just beyond his grasp, crying with frustration when he couldn't get them. Benjamin was quieter, more thoughtful, content to observe the world with those wise, dark eyes. "They're gonna be trouble," Samuel observed, coming to stand beside her. "Both of them, in different ways. Good trouble, I hope."
"Is there any other kind?"
Clara laughed and leaned into him. They had been married for 2 months now, in a ceremony that blended both their traditions. Reverend Gray had performed the Christian rites in the small chapel he was building at the edge of the territory. Grandmother Wren had performed the Cherokee rites, binding their hands together with sacred cord, blessing their union with songs older than memory. It had been the happiest day of Clara's life. "I've been thinking," she said, watching the boys. "About what?" "About the money, the inheritance." Samuel tensed slightly. They had discussed this before, argued about it more than once. The courts had awarded Clara 1/3 of the Blackwood estate, a fortune that had been built on blood and corruption. She had wanted to refuse it, to wash her hands of anything connected to Cornelius. But Samuel had convinced her otherwise. "That money can do good," he had said. "It can rebuild what Blackwood destroyed. It can protect people he would have hurt. Taking it isn't accepting what he did, it's redeeming it." Now Clara had a plan. "I want to buy land," she said. "Not for us, for the Cherokee, for your people." Samuel looked at her sharply. "What do you mean?" "The government's trying to push everyone onto reservations. But if we buy the land legally, put it in a trust, they can't take it. It would be protected. Permanent." "That's—" Samuel shook his head. "Clara, that would cost a fortune." "I have a fortune, or I will, once the estate is settled." She turned to face him. "I know it sounds crazy. I know it won't solve everything. But it's something. It's a start." Samuel was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached out and cupped her face in his hands. "You know what I love most about you?" he said. "What?" "You never stop fighting. Even when you're tired, even when it would be easier to give up, you keep finding new battles to fight." He kissed her softly. "I don't deserve you, Clara Sullivan." "Clara Iron Horse," she corrected. "And you deserve everything." The land purchase took months to arrange. There were lawyers to hire, documents to file, politicians to convince. Clara traveled to Helena 6 times, met with territorial officials, testified before committees, argued until her voice was raw. But in the end, she got what she wanted. 50,000 acres, deeded to a trust managed by Cherokee elders, protected by federal law. It wasn't much compared to what had been taken. But it was a start, a foundation, something to build on. "You did the impossible," Grandmother Wren said when the final papers were signed. "You gave us a future." "No," Clara said. "I just gave you a chance. The future is up to you." The old woman smiled, her weathered face crinkling with warmth. "Running Deer would have liked you. She was stubborn too." Clara touched the bear claw necklace that still hung around her neck. She had tried to return it after the wedding, but Grandmother Wren had refused.
"It's yours now," the old woman had said. "She would have wanted it that way."
Clara wore it every day, a reminder of the woman who had come before her, the love that had been lost, the life that had been cut short. A reminder that survival wasn't enough. You had to live. You had to build something worth living for. 2 years passed. William and Benjamin grew from infants to toddlers to small boys with boundless energy and endless curiosity.
William ran everywhere, climbed everything, got into trouble daily. Benjamin preferred to sit and watch, his dark eyes taking in the world, occasionally offering observations that seemed far too wise for his age. "He's got his father's mind," Clara often said, meaning Thomas. "And his grandmother's temper," Samuel would reply, meaning her. They were happy years, mostly. There were challenges, of course. Crops failed one summer. A fever swept through the village one winter, taking 3 elders and 1 child. The government continued to pressure the Cherokee to relocate, though the protected land made that increasingly difficult. But through it all, Clara and Samuel built their life together. They expanded the cabin, adding rooms for the boys and a proper kitchen. They planted an orchard, apple trees that would take years to bear fruit, but would feed their grandchildren. They became part of the community, neither fully Cherokee nor fully white, but something new, something in between. "Mama," William said one evening, climbing into her lap as she sat by the fire, "tell us the story again." "What story?" "The story of how you met Papa, the story of the blizzard." Clara looked at Samuel, who smiled and shrugged. It had become a favorite bedtime ritual, the boys demanding to hear how their parents had found each other in the worst storm of the century. "Well," Clara began, pulling Benjamin close as well, "it was a very cold night, the coldest night anyone could remember, and your mama was all alone in a little cabin on the mountain." "With us," Benjamin said solemnly. "You were alone with us." "That's right, with you. 2 tiny babies who had just been born." "And then Papa found you," William said eagerly. "Papa saved you." "Your papa did find me, and he did save me." Clara met Samuel's eyes across the fire. "But you know what? I saved him too. We saved each other." "How?" Benjamin asked. "By giving each other something to live for, by being a family." The boys considered this with the seriousness only small children can muster. "I'm glad Papa found you," William said finally. "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." After the boys were asleep, Clara and Samuel sat together on the porch, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. "You know what day it is tomorrow?" Samuel asked. "March 15th. "Why?" 3 years. 3 years since I found you in that cabin." Clara leaned against him, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "Feels like longer. Feels like a whole lifetime." "In some ways it is. The person I was before I met you, he feels like a stranger now." "Is that good or bad?" "Good." Samuel turned to look at her. "Definitely good. That man was dead inside, Clara, just walking around, going through the motions, waiting for the end. You brought me back to life." "You brought me back too. I was ready to die in that cabin. I had given up. And then you appeared like something out of a dream." "Not a dream. Just a half-breed with nothing better to do than wander around in blizzards." Clara laughed and swatted his arm. "Don't talk about my husband that way." "Yes, ma'am." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars. Then Clara said something she had been thinking about for weeks. "I want to write it down." "Write what down?" "Everything. Our story. How we met, what we survived, how we built this life." She gestured at the cabin, the village, the mountains beyond. "I want our boys to know where they came from. I want them to understand what their father died for, what their grandfather tried to do, and why we fought so hard to stop him." Samuel was quiet for a moment. "That's a lot of pain to put on paper. It's a lot of hope, too, and love, and proof that even when everything seems impossible, people can still find their way to something better." "You really believe that?" Clara thought about everything she had been through. The fear, the pain, the moments when giving up had seemed like the only option. And then she thought about what had come after. The friendship, the family, the home she had built with this man who had appeared out of the storm and changed her life forever. "Yes," she said.
I really believe that." Samuel nodded slowly. "Then write it. Write all of it.
And when you're done, we'll read it to the boys. We'll make sure they never forget." Clara started writing the next day. She wrote about Boston, about meeting Thomas at the church social, about falling in love despite her father's reservations. She wrote about Montana, about the Blackwood mansion, about the slow, dawning horror of realizing what kind of family she had married into. She wrote about Thomas's murder, about Cornelius's cruelty, about being dragged from her home and abandoned in a blizzard to die. She wrote about Samuel, about his gentleness and his strength, about the wife he had lost and the pain he carried, about the moment he appeared in that cabin doorway and everything changed. She wrote about the Cherokee village, about Grandmother Wren and Little Sparrow and Grey Wolf and all the others who had taken her in when she had nowhere else to go. About learning that family wasn't just blood, but choice. About building bridges between worlds that had been enemies for too long. She wrote about the trial, about justice, imperfect but real. About watching Cornelius Blackwood led away in chains, knowing that he would spend the rest of his days paying for his crimes. And she wrote about the future, about the land they had protected, about the boys they were raising, about the legacy they were building, not of wealth or power, but of love and courage and the stubborn refusal to give up. The manuscript grew over months, then years. Clara worked on it whenever she had time, late at night after the boys were asleep, early in the morning before the village woke. Samuel read every page, offering suggestions, adding details she had forgotten or never known. By the time she finished, William and Benjamin were 5 years old enough to understand some of what she had written, young enough that the worst parts could wait until they were ready. "Read it to us, Mama," William begged. "Read us the story." So Clara read. She read about the blizzard and the cabin and the man who saved them. She read about the long journey to Helena and the trial that brought a monster to justice. She read about the wedding, about the land, about the future they were building together. And when she finished, Benjamin looked up at her with those wise, solemn eyes and said something that Clara would remember for the rest of her life. "You didn't give up, Mama. No matter how scared you were, you didn't give up." Clara pulled her sons close, feeling tears slide down her cheeks. "No, sweetheart, I didn't give up. And neither did your papa. And neither did all the people who helped us along the way." "Why not?" William asked. "Why didn't you give up?" Clara looked at Samuel, who had appeared in the doorway, listening. He smiled at her, that quiet smile she had come to love more than anything else in the world. "Because giving up means letting the bad people win," Clara said. "And as long as there are good people willing to fight, the bad people can't win. Not forever. That's what your papa taught me. That's what I want you to remember." "We will, Mama," Benjamin said seriously. "We'll remember." "I know you will." That night, after the boys were asleep and the fire had burned down to embers, Clara stood on the porch one last time, looking out at the world they had built. The village spread out before her, peaceful and thriving. Beyond it, the mountains rose toward the stars, eternal and unchanging. Somewhere out there, Thomas was buried in the cold Montana earth. Somewhere out there, Cornelius Blackwood was rotting in a prison cell. Somewhere out there, the future was waiting, uncertain, but full of possibility. Samuel came to stand beside her, his arm wrapping around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything. Nothing. How strange life is."
Strange how?
3 years ago, I was dying in a blizzard with 2 newborn babies, abandoned by everyone I trusted. Now I'm standing here with a home, a family, a purpose. How does that happen? Samuel was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that Clara would carry with her for the rest of her days. It happens because you made it happen. You and the people who loved you. You fought for it, bled for it, refused to accept anything less. He turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. That's the secret, Clara. That's the only secret worth knowing. Life don't give you anything. You have to take it. You have to fight for it. And when you finally get it, you have to protect it with everything you've got. Clara looked into his eyes, seeing her own reflection there, seeing the woman she had become. I love you, Samuel Ironhorse. I love you too, Clara. More than I ever thought I could love anyone again. They kissed, soft and slow, the stars wheeling overhead, the future stretching out before them like a road waiting to be traveled. Clara May Sullivan had been left to die in a blizzard. She had lost her husband, her home, her place in the world. She had faced monsters and survived them. She had built a new life from the ashes of the old one. And now, standing here in the darkness with the man she loved, surrounded by the family she had found, she knew something with absolute certainty. She was home. Not just in this place, with these people, but in herself. In the woman she had become. In the mother, the wife, the fighter, who had refused to surrender no matter how dark things got. Cornelius Blackwood had tried to destroy her. He had failed. The blizzard had tried to kill her. It had failed. Fear and grief and despair had tried to break her. They had all failed. Because Clara May Sullivan Ironhorse was stronger than any of them. Stronger than she had ever known. And nothing, not storms or monsters or the cruelty of men, would ever break her again. The story was finished now. The last page written, the final chapter closed. But the ending wasn't really an ending at all. It was a beginning. And that, Clara knew, was the best kind of ending there was.